Distance Learning with Common Sense. My name is Melissa Cleaver, and I'm one of our Common Sense Education Outreach Managers in Nebraska. And our conversation will be posted in our Common Sense Education YouTube channel, along with all the links and resources that we are going to share with you all today and discuss in our chat. So I started here, and as a former art teacher, I am thrilled to have back with us today some of our folks from Crayola. We have Cheri Sterman and James Wells to chat with us about how educators can create supportive relationships within the entire learning community and especially with families. So to start us off, James and Cheri, can you tell us a little bit more about yourselves and the organization that you represent?
Sure. So I have been a Crayolian for over 30 years. Hard to believe, time flies so fast.
I love the label.
Yeah, we're Crayolians. Yeah. And what is such a joy to work in the most colorful place on the earth. And we are excited that we provide professional development for teachers and learn so much in that process.
All right, how about you, James?
Yes, so James Wells here, and I too am a Crayolian and have been for a little over 3 years. Prior to Crayola, I was a district arts administrator here in Memphis, Tennessee. My background is in the visual arts, and I taught middle school and high school age kids.
Wonderful. All right, so let's start by saying, what does coeducating with families mean in today's environment? Our topic of today.
Right. So there's a silver lining in this whole pandemic cloud, right? I mean, it's, all of the sadness and heaviness and darkness that it has brought on. But the silver lining is that it gives us the opportunity to really up the game for family engagement and to be co-educators. So, since March, education system has really woven in families in a much more significant way. And it's not enough anymore to, check off the box with conferences and a, once a year event, right? This idea of really co-educating and working together as coach-ins of creatively alive children. And we really emphasize that creatively alive aspect because it's about working together to empower student voice and help kids find, their creative superpowers. One of the things we get excited about is not only does, our research document the importance of creativity, but we like it when other groups do that. And the 2019 Gallup poll was so affirming. They found that 87% of teachers and 77% of parents believe that creative experiences are the best learning experiences. They have better learning outcomes than traditional teaching methods. So that's just more fuel to this energy we have around creatively alive kids.
I love that. So maybe you could tell a little bit more of an example of that. Can you kind of dig into that a little bit and unpack that a bit for us?
Absolutely. So, one of the examples that we lean into at Crayola, we've recently designed, is a project, a unit plan around murals and statues. And as we all know, it's a highly discussed topic in today's news cycles. And to be honest, we've been discussing this very topic for the past few years at Crayola. And thinking about, kind of real relevant content, I would like to hear from the audience, if you don't mind, in the chat box. If you could type in, again, I'm going to be talking about murals and statues here for a moment, but I would love for you to type in the chat box what successes and barriers you have had around particular relevant topics of today, or even this topic, if you, been courageous to bring this to your students. So I would love to hear this, hear your insights around this here. So again, getting to murals and statues, we all know that this is a public art medium, a public art display, and public art depicts subjects that people hold dear to their heart in a particular moment in time. And we know that points of views change over time, right? And that's inevitable, right? Our points of views change. So when we think about the process of public art, it usually involves a wider community. They're trying to gather insight around values and beliefs. So with this particular unit, you know, in thinking about public art and again, co-educating, right? So schools, I've seen, you know, they've invited the community and artists in to create or enact murals outside of buildings. You know, and we're thinking about co-educating. So parents and families, as they're navigating their cities and towns and communities, they oftentimes run into public art displays. So when we talk about murals and statues in our unit plan, we want to encourage children to examine public art murals and statues and discuss, you know, whether the people, the events, the statues presented, if they represent what the community currently, right? So then they're challenged to articulate these positive values that they believe should be represented in their community by creating a work of art, right? Extracting a work of art. It can be through a sketch, maybe it could be through a 3D representation, but they are kind of creating an inventory. Like, this is what's currently in my community. Does this really represent who or what we believe? And then if not, what can we then create that represents our core values as a community? And in doing that, again, we give students power and voice. It creates an opportunity for students to take their learning between the school building and at home, which ultimately cascades to a creation of a public art that's, again, done by the student or the child.
You know,
so
yeah,
that's one example.
You mentioned kind of some of those courageous conversations and the space for that to be had, and that's so important. And it kind of reminds me, Common Sense has in our education curriculum a theme that focuses on relationships and communication and how important that's part of developing their digital citizenship. You know, students need to develop those dispositions not only in their real life platforms, but also in their online platforms. And a lot of times around art and controversial art, sometimes those topics come up and, you know, being able to talk about. So maybe Cheri, can you tell us some of Crayola's strategies or tools to empower and facilitate that student voice and taking on those different points of view that are so important?
So we find it really helpful to have a tool. I'm hoping you can see here with my calendar the acronym that we've developed that helps to create relationships. And this helps to guide the conversations really around, you know, public art, around any aspect of a classroom experience. So it's an acronym with you know 6 letters to help us remember the stages. And we really find these to be the 6 pillars of strong relationships between people, right? So I'll provide the first 3 and then turn it over to James. So we think that the way you start to create positive relationships is to focus on celebrating the strengths, right? So when you're interacting with others, really finding their superpowers, finding their strengths and accentuating that, right? The second is to respect diversity, and that can be diverse thoughts, diverse points of view, right? And so even when students disagree with each other, it's learning to respect those perspectives really in a healthy conversation. They don't have to agree, but they do have to respectfully have that dialogue. And then the E is about engaging fully, right? The only way to have a good relationship is to engage fully. That means really, you know, for students, it's reminding them to fully listen to the other person, to really lean forward, be curious, you know, ask your questions. You're getting to understand others and what their art is trying to convey. James, you want to dive into the next 3?
Absolutely, yes. So getting to our A here, accepting mistakes as human learners. You know, one of the things that stuck with me, a quote that I would often hear, and this was K through 5th grade, elementary school. No one's perfect. That's why pencils have erasers, right? And that one has stuck with me for, gosh, you know, over 30 years now. And, you know, in thinking about that, you know, accepting mistakes, you know, we're human, right? And we're bound to make mistakes, but understanding that in those mistakes, that's when learning actually takes place,
Absolutely.
right? So extending grace and accepting those mistakes allows for us to build strong, positive relationships, right? So the next one is T, trust one another with positive intent. And understanding that, I'm building this trust, having this trusting relationship with you. If we ever get to a point of contention, right, we can navigate through that quickly because we've established that trust and understanding that there is positive happening. And I would also encourage you to do this, particularly in a remote learning, one another with positive intent, because, you may, as an educator, mistakenly, skip over a student, not call a student's name during a sharing exercise, right? And, my bad, I didn't mean, please, why don't you share, right? So establishing that culture that, mistakes can happen. And in some cases, I may miss you, but know that I'm trying to do the best to serve you as my student. So, I think that this will be a really good one to use, particularly in a remote learning environment. And then lastly, extending learning with high expectations. We know that when we set high expectations, it allows students to reach their full potential, right? So, and it creates an opportunity for growth mindset. So,
Yeah.
in establishing relationships, building relationships, extending learning is key for students, again, to reach their full potential in themselves and for
Well,
us
and
as well. So I love this
yeah,
protocol. It's great.
so, and last one with E, even extend learning, especially in this remote learning environment, you have a lot of different options of a way allowing a child to express themselves. You have the chat, you have, video recordings that they can do in Flipgrid, or, different tools that give a wide variety of ways of students being able to extend that learning. That's like, so tell me a little bit.
And one of the other ways that we like to talk about extending learning is really leaning into the student's interest, right?
Yeah.
Because we come in with a plan, but how much richer when we respond to their curiosity. And I think that's what's super powerful.
Such a good point. So tell me about why create relationships tools is so important to students explore social justice stories that need to be told. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we love using the create relationship tool for all sorts of interactions, right? It gets to be the guardrails, additions. For young children, we like to break it up and chunk it so they don't have the whole set of 6 pillars at once. But once children become really used to this, it provides that on-ramp for what we call courageous conversations. And that's really, when we're exploring social justice, there can be a lot of emotion. There can be a lot of perspectives that kids bring in from their family, or they could be playing, tapes they've heard that they haven't completely digested and understood how it might have affected others. And so going back to these, pillars and asking the questions about, really, are we really trusting each other's positive intent here? And are we respecting diversity? And having kids reflect as a self-assessment of, are the things that I'm saying and as my way of responding to a classmate really being respectful of this relationship, these goals?
That makes me think about, I, as an art teacher, used to take some of my students to a local so that we could expose them to university a bit, and we would look at statues, and we would use those statues as a way to try to protect different perspectives. It was we called it if these statues could talk, kind of off of that television program, If These Walls Could Talk, and have the students take on that perspective, which that perspective taking is such an important habit of mind to develop, especially in our online environments, so that we can slow ourselves down and think about how others might be reacting. So what ways can we can empower student voices and develop those perspectives that connect to relevant topics in the curriculum and in curriculum as well as.
Well, to build on what you just stated, and again, this is kind of a dovetail off of murals and statues. If we look at, again, the current news cycle, as I just pointed out, we can look to the state of Mississippi, right? they just went through this vexillology process, right? The process or the design of flags, vexillology. And Mississippi, in the spirit of social justice and respecting diversity of thoughts and ideas and being inclusive, the state of Mississippi solicited designs from the public to recreate the state flag. Right, we all know, that Confederate symbol. There was created a moment of content, and that resulted in them putting out a call for the recreation of the state flag, a very inclusive process. So in thinking about that, this would be great for you to point this out to students, to say, hey, we want you to create something as a flag, right? And we know that educators have done this before. I've done this where I've had students create a state flag or even create a family crest, right, of things that your family values that's important. So interview family members and get their insights, right? So that's one opportunity to do it, right? Taking a real live relevant example that's happening today, right? That recently happened with the flag. And another example is what we've done at Crayola. We've created another plan in addition to Murals and Statues, which is Buddies Keep Me Company. And I want to make sure I mention this before I forget. Murals and Statues, you will actually receive the project plan for that. So thank you for joining in, everyone. You're going to get that nice surprise. So you'll get that unit plan as well as Buddies Keep Me Company. And that's a plan where we give students an opportunity to practice those perspective taking skills, where they create little buddies and they take them along the journey with them throughout the day, and they're writing and thinking about the perspective of their buddy, and they can swap those buddies with other friends, right? So again, it creates an opportunity for them to get in the shoes of the buddy that they have and write about that experience from their perspective. And again, it allows for them to practice that perspective taking that we want students to do, particularly when we talk about topics such as social justice, right? So there's a video, a 2-minute video that comes along with that, as well as a project plan. So we're so excited to share these ideas and insights today. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that with everybody. That'll be great. Well, so Cheri, what is the top takeaway you want to share with everyone that joined us today? And then,
well, I would just like everyone to remember about the Create Relationships tool and how important it is for us to create relationships, not only with our students, but now in particular, we have such a great chance to weave their families into our remote teaching experiences.
How about you, James? Can you tell us what's your one takeaway you want to share?
Yeah, my takeaway is, public art provides a springboard for important conversations about particular community values, as well as social justice, right? And, again, these are things that are available and accessible to us all. You don't have to go into a museum. You can walk right out your front door in many cases, or you can take a stroll in your neighborhood or drive to any particular part of your town. You're bound to run into a mural or a statue. And let's use that as a springboard to have some healthy dialogue and use the Create tool as a framework to have some productive, positive conversations around topics that sometimes can be tough to have.
I love that. And you don't need to be an art educator. Any parent can engage in that Create relationships tool. So this was just wonderful. Such great resources that you guys have. I appreciate your time today, James and Cheri. I just enjoyed with you both and hearing these great tools for us as educators, as parents that we can use in helping bridge that gap and make those connections to our world. So just want to remind everybody that this conversation will be posted on our Common Sense YouTube channel, along with the links again. So you'll get those resources. If you're checking out the chat, you'll see it here. You'll also see Cheri and James's Twitter channel, so you can follow them on Twitter. And hope that you enjoyed our session today, and maybe we have any questions.
There's one point that we just wanted to be sure. It is on the follow-up materials they get, but if you want to do a shout out for the upcoming webinar that we're doing.
That's right.
with Peter Reynolds. We are connecting the dots, right? Play on the dot club and the dot book, connecting the dots between RC. And there is time to still sign up for that webinar.
I'm sure it'll be an awesome webinar. Peter Reynolds is a great illustrator. It'll be one you won't want to miss. So.
And people will be creating stories with his prompts. Can you imagine the delight of creating your own dot story alongside Peter?
Fantastic.
Question from the background. I know this is a voice. This is the chat moderator that pulled a question. I hope that you can answer. Is there a place that you can access a map of public art in your area?
Oh, the National Endowment of the Arts used to have a Creative Hotspots map on their website, but I don't know if it's still there.
Sometimes
it was a number of years ago.
Chambers of Commerce may sometimes have maps of public art as well, sometimes.
Thank you.
James?
Yeah, yes, no, to add to that, what I would do is just do a search of your local chamber, local arts council, if you have one. I know that there's a state arts commission in every state. So I think that, starting there will be good. And then looking up your public art commission, those 3 words, public art commission, local area, something is bound to pop up. So that's a great question. That shows us that there's some action that's happening. So that's good. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I want to just mention is that now we're also accustomed to doing virtual experiences. We don't have to be limited to our local community. And you could be going on a virtual field trip and exploring art from around the world.
Yeah, and I'll put a plug in our Wide Open Schools with Common Sense. You should be able to find some great, some of those virtual field trips that you can take your students on. So go check those out. So be great. All right. Were there any other questions?
And actually, if you don't mind, I would like to add just to that comment or question around public art displays. If you find that there's nothing in your local area, of course, Cheri gave some great wisdom and insight that we live in a digital space where you're not bound to your area. But if you find it tough to find some in your community, what a great opportunity to inspire kids and families to then create one. Let's have a lesson to create one, and then maybe seek out a teaching artist in the community to partner up. So this could be a great learning opportunity. If you find that you don't see one in your local community, let's create one. And if you do, of course, use our project plan to have some discussions around building other ones as well.
Oh, and I love Sue's comment. I just noticed Sue was saying, have the students create the map of where the public art is. As they observe it, as they see it, map it out. Beautiful, Sue. What a great cross-curricular lesson. Beautiful.
And you could even use, like, Padlet has their mapping tool, so you could even plot things on the Padlet map that shows where all the public art is at, making it more remote learning and distance learning friendly.
And then you get into all kinds of really rich discussions with students about what is art.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're talking graffiti, we're talking murals, right? You're going to have lots of perspectives on what is art.
It was a wonderful idea. All right.
Well, we're building a nice integrated plan here.
Yeah, I want to go do it.
This is great.